Ayahuasca es de nuestros abuelos cuando ellos tomaban para tener visión espiritual de la selva, del río, también de la lluvia, de los cerros. Contiene de que este es bueno para salud de un chamanismo, control del chamanismo y, y tener más energía para el chamán y para controlar toda la selva. Entonces la boa es un chamán o tigre es un chamán. Espiritualmente, todo animal contiene a este espíritu de ayahuasca.
For centuries, indigenous cultures throughout North and South America have held traditional rituals and ceremonies where people are healed with the help of shamans or priests. These shamans administer a medicine that helps the people of the village have a spiritual experience with God, to have their spirits cleansed and healed. The cultures in the South American Amazon use the psychedelic compound dimethyltryptamine, and the cultures in North America use the compound psilocybin. Most of the time unaware of Western innovations in medicine, these indigenous religious cultures choose to rely on their medicine that has been passed down for many generations. In the United States, we use medicine and therapy to help physical and mental health. These cultures do the same thing wrapped into one, a psychedelic medicine where you have a sort of therapy session with God. Robert Gordon Wasson was an international banker and author who had a fascination with mushrooms that he shared with his wife. On his off time, he and his wife researched mycology, traveling the world documenting species of mushrooms.
We went into the Mazatec area, far from the highways, remote from Mexico City. There we found that rotten bagasse, as it's called, bagasso, covered with mushrooms. These mushrooms I didn't know, had never seen. They were the sacred mushrooms.
In 1955, RGW was among the first from the United States or the West to attend a Maria Sabina sacred mushroom ritual in Mexico. He brought back the first psilocybin specimens for Western science to observe. These expeditions and specimens helped usher in the next era of American society, counterculture.
There is often a loss of the normal cause and effect relationships of things going on in the environment. And this leads to distortion of judgment.
We at the National Institute of Mental Health provide much of the research money for investigations with LSD. Of late, we've been concerned about the biological hazards of LSD.
LSD-25 has been found by several investigators to cause breakage in human chromosomes in studies carried out on peripheral blood of persons who have taken this drug.
And the bad trip? Instant insanity, often a never-never land of no return.
No, Terry, no, get away, get away, Terry, get away. It's all right. No, get away, get away. No, all right. Terry, closer, Terry, get away. Get away.
Whether she will ever be the same again, have the same personality, the same ambitions, the same abilities to work, to love, to get along with other people, that we won't know for a long time.
In the 1960s and 70s, Western medicine failed the scientific process. Biased, unchecked, and unfinished experiments and misconceptions about psychedelics made their way into documentaries and newspapers. Psychedelics became a taboo subject, and people who used psilocybin, LSD, and marijuana were labeled as hippies who were the losers of society. We look back at this era and might think that hippies were everywhere, but they weren't. The impact of the movement was just so large. To the people from the outside, the lazy hippie population was disrupting society and stomping on the hard work and sacrifice of many Americans. This kind of rhetoric was used during Richard Nixon's presidency when he began the war on drugs.
America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse.
And the entire attitude of the administration was later exposed by John Ehrlichman. Ehrlichman says outright that the war on drugs was the administration's way of pursuing hippies and black people to push against the anti-war sentiment and civil rights movement. A wave of heroin use had hit the United States and black communities in low-income ghettos, while hippies tended to use marijuana and psychedelics. Richard Nixon used these populations as political leverage to attack opponents and trash the reputation of research of psychedelics in the process. Here we are today.
Hello, is he gonna say something back?
Having lost the war on drugs, we've never had more drug abuse, homelessness, and overdoses than ever before. What drugs are responsible for the epidemic we've been struggling through? Heroin, oxycodone, fentanyl, and hydrocodone, and many more opioids that are bringing tens of thousands of people down every year. Of course, there is the horrific instance of Purdue Pharmaceuticals and the VA overprescribing dangerously addictive opioids to veterans. Huge pharmaceutical companies magically have employees taken and put into government positions and spend millions of dollars on lawyer fees protecting from the False Claims Act. The opioid epidemic and crack epidemic in the 80s are both instances of government ignorance and corruption. The United States has only used the prohibition of drugs to come after groups it feels threatened by. Mexicans with marijuana, Italian or Irish people with alcohol, Chinese people with opium, black people with cocaine, and hippies with psychedelics. So 50, 60 years ago, the government was warning the population that LSD would break your chromosomes and deform your fetus, while they should have been warning people that the Western medicine, scientific medicine, can be dangerously addictive. Today, marijuana, LSD, DMT, and many other psychedelic substances are still scheduled as more dangerous than cocaine and many other opioids. After new research done by Johns Hopkins University and many other respected research organizations, science is studying new methods of using psychedelics. Johns Hopkins has done studies on the effects of psilocybin on people with major depressive disorder, and the results are game-changing, with a hard-hitting 54% of participants were considered in remission after the 4-week follow-up.
Simply 2 doses of psilocybin given under these supportive conditions to people who've been carefully screened and prepared for a psilocybin session. That treatment produces both rapid and large reductions in depressive symptoms, with most patients studied.
There are other instances psychedelics have been tested to see if they reduce anxiety for people with life-threatening cancer diagnoses, which also get strikingly positive results. Studies have also shown that psychedelics can have a helpful effect with tobacco and alcohol addictions. But the situation can get complicated when individuals with existing mental illnesses such as schizophrenia or bipolar disorder take psychedelics. There is potential for manic episodes and psychotic breaks. Psychedelics are not for everyone and should be taken in the right environment with precaution to your own mental state. The body of evidence for the medicinal use of psychedelics needs more growth, and if science determines that they can be helpful to society, it will be up to the government and the DEA to get over their sneaky agreements with pharmaceutical corporations and help people's mental health. After all, one thing is for sure. Psychedelic substances can be medicine on the same playing field as SSRIs in terms of the healing ability of the psyche. And the indigenous cultures that have been using these substances for generations have had their own effective form of antidepressants for centuries.